Welcome to the first episode of Coventry Confidential. This is a new podcast of mine. I've been doing my other podcast, Portrait of an Editor, since 2017, and now I've decided to branch out a bit. And thank you, Jon Hand, for being my first guest.
Thank you, Francis. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on here with you.
As they say, give us the elevator pitch of Jon Hand so people can just get to know you a little bit more.
So about me, I literally grew up in this town, lived here my entire life. I grew up in the South Coventry and now I live in North Coventry. Of course, it's all one Coventry, but there are neighborhoods. I grew up in the Village and now I'm up by CVS and Walgreens and all that. So, like I said, I was born here. And I have a great love for this town. It is my hometown. And I have experienced the school system here. I'm a product of the school system. Let's see, I have a wife and two daughters. My wife is a teacher in the school system, and my daughters attend the schools here in Coventry. I have a vested interest in what happens to this town. And my roots are right here. This is Coventry is where I'm from, and I identify strongly with it. With that, in 2017, I ran for and was elected to our town council. So you spend a lot of time running for office, and then if you're lucky enough to get elected and your fellow townspeople trust you to help make decisions to guide the future of the town forward through time, then you get to volunteer lots of time to give back. And that's how I look at it, actually. I look at it as really giving back to the community that helped raise me. I have very fond memories of walking the streets of this town, riding my bike around in the Village and all that. And it's great to see the subtle but definitely significant improvements around the town that have happened over the 55 years I've been here. Like I said, I'm currently in my fourth 2-year term serving on the town council, and I do really, really enjoy having some input into guiding the future of this town forward, along with my fellow councilors.
Coventry's probably changed over the years, so people might know who you are, but there's also a lot of new faces too, right?
There's to be honest, there's it's about a 50-50 mix as far as people I know in town. There's about half of my, grew up with the families or knew somebody in the family and stuff like that. But there's a ton of people in town who did not grow up here. They moved in and chose Coventry as a place to raise their family. And, we have great schools. The town has a lot to offer between the lake and, some walkable spaces, the Village, all that has to offer. I know we have a little bit on the antiques trail here in town. That's definitely something that has happened again throughout my entire life. Let's be honest. A lot of people know Coventry or learn about Coventry from places like the Bidwell Tavern.
Yeah.
It is literally when I mention, if I'm at some other meeting somewhere and I run some other people and I mention I'm from Coventry and they say, "Oh, Bidwell Tavern." So it's kind of opens the door a little bit. And then I talk about how I grew up right down the street from there, and it's just a great place. So this is definitely a lot of opportunities to volunteer in this town. And I know I'm doing it in this way, volunteering on town council. And in my role as steering chair on the council, I encourage others to seek out and look at what kind of boards and commissions and committees, and there are a bunch of them. There's really something for everyone. We are very blessed in this town to get volunteers who step up with incredible experience, skills, and certifications to fill some of these seats on our boards and commissions. Some of them are very technical, and you have to have certain certifications, and people step up. I continue to be amazed in the seat that I'm currently occupying, that's chair of the steering committee, that the people that we get to volunteer for these are so qualified and so willing to give of themselves, give up their time on, few nights or whatever the commitment is different for each board and commission. but to give of themselves for the betterment of the community. That's very similar to what I feel I'm doing.
Everything is a volunteer for you. You had a volunteer to run, and from my experience, you're giving up a summer, especially as a new candidate. It's a 4 month long process just to possibly get elected. And then once you get elected, you're doing that for free. So you are meeting twice a month, right? And then
it's actually three. It's actually three.
The board you
there's
sit
two
on.
regular council meetings.
And then
there's you're either on finance or steering for another one. So every counselor meets at least three Mondays a month.
It's for a 2 to 3 hour meeting.
if you're lucky, it stays to 2 to 3 hours.
Wishful
and then
thinking.
During this season right now, it's funny you bring that up.
Yeah.
During budget season, it's more meetings and they tend to be longer. And that's okay with me, because that's really, it's funny. It's a good segue here. That's really where you get to hear from the different departments about what their priorities are and why they have included certain things in their budget. And they get to tell you about the work they're doing, the constituents they're serving, how they're getting it done, how they hope to do that better with maybe some investment or maybe some changes to what they currently have. So that's you're right. That's really the part of it where we get to learn from the folks that are doing this service to the community each day. That's the area where we learn about from that, and we can use that input to help make our decisions about how to move forward with our, quite frankly, limited resources.
Yeah. Before we get really into the budget thing, I wanted the volunteer and how that augments a lot of stuff, because you're volunteering, and then anybody who volunteers on a committee or anybody who volunteers on something that's happening for the community. If the town had to pay people for that and for your job, it sounds like it could be easily a part-time job. I mean, our budget would just be out of control. I mean, I know every year, the budget, there is a budget fight, and people, Connecticut is not cheap to live in. It would just be impossible, really, if you had to pay everybody for everything. So having the community, donate their time really helps everybody. I mean, would you like to see more volunteers? Would that alleviate some of the problems that, some of the financial stress that Coventry faces at times, if you had a robust volunteer aspect of the town government, of town community?
Well, I'll say it kind of takes a little bit of both. I mean, the volunteers bring their life experience and their living in this town experience. That's really their perspective. That's really what they generally bring. And there's, of course, their skills and certifications and things on certain, like the land use boards and things like that. But what they really bring to it is the fact that the process for anyone who has to, I'll use the example of planning and zoning or inland wetlands or something, where a citizen is trying to do something with their land. They bring a perspective that is, they're also fellow citizens in town. So the people reviewing your application and whatnot are really fellow citizens in town who have a vested interest in the furtherance of the town and in keeping the town nice. You know what I mean? So that's what I feel they bring. It is true, if all of this had to be paid, that would be an entirely different scenario. But I think the strength of the volunteerism aspect here is that it brings, these people have skin in the game. They live here, they're taxpayers here, and that's literally how I approach my volunteer elected position on the town council. I'm a taxpayer in Coventry, and I don't want to pay any more than is necessary to provide the investments and services we all expect and enjoy.
Yeah, let's face it. We're all New Englanders. We all hate paying taxes, right?
Yeah,
we're all Americans.
Nobody wants to pay more than they have to.
Yeah,
but it's also true that none of this is free to do this stuff, to provide police and fire and education for our kids. That's really the whole one of the major functions of having a town government at all, is to make sure those things are provided for, and roads and clearing those roads in stormy weather, the snowstorms and ice events and things of that nature. All, those things need to happen. People definitely have come to expect those services to happen and get to enjoy that. That's what people are getting for the tax dollars they put in every year. They are getting something. It's easy to kind of take that stuff for granted, but as soon as it stops happening for some reason, people are very quick to raise their voice about it and be like, hey, wait a minute, why can't we do better on that? I know when some new folks will move to town and they'll start to ask some questions, and because we're rural out here in Coventry, we don't provide as many services as maybe a small city or a larger city even does. But like there are some like very suburban communities that I'll use. The one good example I can think of is, and I have seen it asked a few times on the local forums, when does leaf pickup happen? Like many folks are used to in a suburban, community, they're used to raking their leaves to the curb, and then a big truck with a vacuum comes up, a vac shredder comes up and picks them all up. We don't do that in Coventry. That's not a service that has been deemed important enough. We live out in the woods. You drag your leaves into the woods. That's that. But it is something that people in other communities expect, and then they come here and go, oh, they literally ask the question, and folks, I believe mostly nicely, told them that's not something, that's not a service we pay for out here. That is not. So the community makes choices about what services they expect and can afford.
You feel, seeing you've grown up here, you've been here from day one, that Coventry, when I moved to Coventry, I'm from a small town just over in Massachusetts, basically the same size, actually, same size population, same size geographically. It's a really big town geographically. And Coventry blows it out of the water. And I think, with services, with just the community aspect there that's available, and upkeep too. It actually, my town, from what I've known, has an up and down sort of process. It's, feast or famine. But Coventry, I've been here since 2016, seems to be stable, even through COVID, things the town council and board of education seem to manage things pretty well, that tried to keep things stable. Now, I don't have any children in the school system, and I don't know what the disruption was. Maybe that was, but what you've seen, the progression of this town, has it been towards like more in a way, or, and more access, more things to do for a small town, just more of a robust offering and support?
So the things I've seen in my life here are, I would classify them as long-term improvements over time. We're not throwing giant sums of money every year trying to make these drastic changes. Connecticut in general, land of steady habits, right? And I think we are a very good example of that. I think there's a strong sentiment of preservation here in Coventry. We like to preserve things. We like steady things. We definitely have a respect for the history of the town, the deep, rich cultural heritage we have here in Coventry. And everybody's very proud of, Nathan Hale. This is the birthplace of Nathan Hale, and the Nathan Hale homestead, and all of the other historic elements around the town. So we have kind of definitely a flavor of that. And with that, I know that there has been a thread that runs through all of this, is that folks like living here because of the rural nature. They like the rural nature, not afraid to neat it up around the edges, for lack of a better term. I know, even though there was some pushback, but people do generally enjoy and use the sidewalks and things that are, it's not all the way around the lake yet, but there are large sections of sidewalks there. The new sidewalk to get from connect to the South Street sidewalk and get you over to the Nathan Hale homestead and the farmers market on the days that it's there. People have definitely seen that as a safety improvement, and care was taken to make sure it fits in with the nature of that neighborhood. So I think that's important. I think that's the type of thing that I've seen. The biggest example, and again, it hits home for me because I grew up there, is the improvements that have happened in Coventry Village in South Coventry. It's always been great. It is now great and more accessible for all kinds of folks. Even just it's very walkable, very accessible, and it's very pleasing without being all. It's definitely not strip mauled. That's not it. It is definitely not paved over everything. I think there's a very strong nod to the history of the area and to maintaining the look and feel of that, as opposed to just going with whatever cheap knockoff industrial design, whatever. Like I'm just saying, it's definitely. There's definitely a strong nod to the flavor of the community and preserving that. So as a segue from that, I have to say,
well, one second. You also, like in Coventry Village, I don't know, more good luck than good management. You got like 3 anchors. Oh, no, 4. You have Nathan Hale Barbershop, I believe that's correct. The Bidwell, Woke, and Wasabi, who are all doing really well. I mean, these are like destination places to bring you down to the village, and then on a Sunday you can go walk and do your antiquing. But it's amazing, watching that sort of evolve into this, and then all of a sudden you got 4 destination places in town that are it appears to be doing well, and deliver on definitely Wasabi delivers on the food. That's the last place I've been to. So.
It's great there. It's great there. There's a lot of great places in town. And I was going to say, and one of the things about Coventry, as we segue into, it is budget season, and I know that's a little bit of what we want to at least touch base on. This is
10 minutes left with that one. Yeah.
An example of what the townspeople have come to expect and enjoy is Coventry's rural nature. I grew up here and I love it. I love the rural nature, but the reality is there's a cost to that rural nature. It's that we don't have much in the way of commercial or industrial enterprise to help pay the cost of running the town each year, AKA the budget, to help pay for the budget. So that burden is largely carried by the residential real estate, the real property owners. I took a look at our grand list, which is recently out, and I ran the percentages by value. It has the number of dollars for each of these 3 categories. So you got real property, you got motor vehicles, and then you have personal property. So the stuff carrying the biggest, just the lion's share, the massive share, real property is 89.5% of the grand list. So they will be paying 89.5% of the tax bill, the budget, funding the budget. Motor vehicles is 7%, and personal property is 3.5%. So having said, in other towns, they have more. So part of that real property, if you look deeper into that, is part is residential, part is commercial. And the reality is we have one of the smallest percentages of commercial real estate in a town in all of Connecticut. Which is, again, that's the beauty of our town. We have almost no commercial industrial makeup. Mm-hmm. But then when it comes time to pay for all the things we come to expect, to pay to run the town for another year, to buy the salt, to put on the roads, to run the plow trucks and all that, it's on the property owners. It's on it's on the residential property largely. And that's the double-edged sword of, we love our rural nature, but then when budget time, we hear from lots of folks who are like, it's too expensive. And they say, why can't it be more like, insert name of other town here? And then you talk to them and you point out, well, let's look at the makeup of that town. There's a lot of businesses in that town. They have a very, industrial complex or something filled with manufacturing companies. It's off to the side. Nobody notices it, but they pay a lot of taxes, and that makes the burden a little less on the homeowners, So we don't really have that. It seems to be a choice that the town has embraced over the years. And it's just a matter of people have to realize that it is a choice we're making and there is a cost to it to maintain it that way. Now, little improvements have happened over the years. We got a Dunkin' Donuts, we got a CVS, we got a Walgreens. There are things that have happened. At the same time, costs have gone up. You cannot overlook the fact that everything in your life has gotten more expensive over the last, decade, last 5 years. I'm just saying that's the thing.
One thing, you've been on the board for a while. So have you guys ever had a conversation about how to alleviate that sort of addiction to just personal property? Has there been a conversation? I mean,
Yes.
obviously there's been conversations about trying to, court other businesses to come into town and stuff like that. I mean, but anything else
So
beyond, outside of the box, I guess would be a question, and beyond just the usual go-tos.
So I will say this. It is a question of infrastructure largely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very expensive infrastructure. And that has to do with sewers.
Mm-hmm.
Sewers and sewer capacity. So in the village, we have sewers. Around the lake, we have sewers. But there are swaths of, tracts of land in the town that don't have it. And one of the biggest one, the biggest one that shows promise, an area for development, but it can't be done at this time, is on Route 44 towards the Bolton town line. A lot of progress and work has been done to connect and allow sewers and go in and, try to get some grant money to put sewers and stuff. That would really open up an area that's already got a state highway running through it and already has, some industrial development there. It would just really allow that to maybe grow a little more. Now, I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I do know without the sewers, it ain't coming.
Yeah.
That's the reality, is many businesses will not build where there aren't sewers. Many.
And that's a thing. I recently just joined the Connecticut Film and Television Alliance, and that's one thing we've been, going to the governor about television and film productions don't need infrastructure. They come to your area because of what's already there. And I've discovered, surprisingly, that Connecticut has had a nice uptick in the recent years in productions. I mean, of course, you have the Hallmark movies and, WWE and ESPN, but I'm talking about using location shoots. And Coventry, who has the benefit of a very nice rural appearance, would benefit from that, because you have a production come in, they inject money. They're not asking for infrastructure, and they basically, leave the place the way they found it. It just seems like there are things, like I was asking, what is, outside of the box thinking? That is something, but you also, that's a luck of being chosen, for production. But I mean, are there things that aren't infrastructure dependent? Is the question of what can you do with what you have now, instead of, hoping, building infrastructure, which takes a long time. And then you have to have businesses decide. And, we're free markets. So a business has to decide to come in here, and you have to court businesses. You have to spend even more money to, you have to spend money to make money.
There was some talk of things that require minimal infrastructure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A few years back, there was talk of, and this is kind of the confluence of a couple of things, that did you know that this area of Connecticut appears to be on have like one of the safest ratings? We have, relative to other places, very few natural disaster events here.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to, earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes. All in all, they rate all the places, and we're in a very relatively safe zone. Does that mean anything bad never happens here? No, it doesn't mean that. But it does mean the frequency with which those traditionally has happened. And I will underscore that, because let's all face it, climate change is not a hoax. Climate change is real, and things are changing. But statistically, if you look at that, and there are folks who study this, relatively safe area. Having said that, one of the things that require minimal infrastructure, and is now a possibility, because we do have very high speed internet connectivity in the area available would be some sort of data center where it's the type of thing where would there probably be a lot of jobs? No, but there's very high value on the equipment inside of one of those things, which means it could add to the tax base without really sucking up a lot of resources or requiring a lot extra from town services.
Mm-hmm.
So they would need, obviously, you've seen this with AI and everything. They would need a lot of power. So again, I'm not a grid engineer, an electrical utility grid engineer.
Oh, we don't have enough time to talk about electricity in Connecticut right now. So.
Yes, we do. But with that, I'm just going to say that is the type of one type of development that was looked at because and try to be encouraged and they don't come around all the time, but that's definitely something for some sort of development that would add to our tax rolls, help get something helping us pay the taxes without necessarily destroying our rural nature. Generally, those things don't require a lot of heavy trucks coming and going. It's kind of you set it up and you feed it power, and there's a few people that have to work there. I mean, we have spots like that in town already. There is an industrial park in town, and maybe that's a thing. I don't know, but I know that the idea of kicking around, like you said, has there been any thought to figuring out what sort of developments could happen that could help ease the burden? Yes, some has, and it's one of those things where it comes up from time to time. It always looking for new opportunities. I know I always keep my ear open for it, and I'm guessing my fellow counselors do as well. But it's very fickle, and unfortunately, I don't see a lot of companies looking to make any kind of big investments in anything right now. There's a very lot of uncertainty in the market over the last couple of months.
Yeah,
that's the reality. So I don't know if a lot of big investments will happen right now. So, but long term, and that's how we have to look at this. That's another thing that I've learned on the council is how important it is, and I think that something councils I previously served on and long into the past have done. We seem to have some very good, steering this ship with a long-term fiscal responsibility. Like that has been a theme that I have tried to maintain. And you can't just be every year reacting to, what the thing is this year. There's always going to be some issue this year, but you have to make decisions that are not going to, create problems in future years. You have to like pave the way, steer the ship steady, in the correct direction. Anyway, you're not going to, even if you can't get all the way there this year, you can point it in the right direction and hopefully guide it safely home to harbor.
So with a couple minutes that we have left, with it being budget season, just give me a rundown of where we are right now, because I guess one thing we're not locked into an actual number yet, because it is basically superintendent and the town manager presented their budget. So now it's time for negotiations. How long does that last, and what's the next big, when do things start, sort of really come into view of what with the budget you're looking at? And just really quickly, because we only got a couple minutes left.
Sure, no problem. So right now we are, as we mentioned at the top, right now we are meeting with the various departments. Department heads come in and present the details of their, what I call their budget asks to us. And so we can have a better understanding of what are their priorities, and so that we can kind of gauge that and make it all fit as part of the budget and see where we think overall in the whole budget, which things can we kind of do and which things can we kind of have to put off for a different year. With that right now, we've been meeting with them already. We've had 3 big meetings with department heads, and those will continue for a couple of weeks, I believe. And then after that, then it's time for deliberations within the town council, at which point we will, propose, I feel safe to say, propose some cuts from what the superintendent and the board presented to the town manager, and the town manager incorporated in his town manager's proposed budget. We're meeting, like I said, we're doing the meetings there. And then the next phase will be some town council budget deliberations. That's where we will take a look at all the notes we took, look at the priorities, figure out what we want. Probably lots of what's presented in front of us, but what can we afford really in this environment and everything. And then the next thing will be on Saturday, April 26th at 10 a.m. in Coventry High School Veterans Auditorium. There will be the annual town meeting on the final budget. So we will then vote and adopt the budget, and then it'll go to the town. It's called adjourned to the town meeting. It'll be presented at the town meeting, and then a vote will take place, that people will be able to ask questions and things like that. And then the vote, the actual referendum vote, will happen on Tuesday, May 6th, from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the fire department, diagonally across from the town hall. Across from Captain Nathan Hale School. That is the town budget referendum that everybody hears about. That's the time when it's time to vote, yes or no on the budget.
So for almost the next 6 weeks, you guys are still forming the budget that will be presented at the town meeting. There's nothing is nailed down right now. Basically.
Correct. No, it's in flux. What we have here is the budget. The department heads got together, and under the town manager's direction, I believe he gave them some direction and said, you can't ask for the moon, but tell us what you need. And then they all present it to him, and then he collates it together. And he already, from his perspective, where he sees it all come together, and he has, can have a longer term look at things and know which things will be priority in which year. And there's probably, there's rationale behind that. But so he makes some cuts already before he presents it to the town council. They presented it to the town council, and then he did a public hearing on it to present it to the public. And like I said, and now we're doing that deep dive into each of the department heads and have them come talk to us about their priorities. And then this is very much in flux. This is very much the part where adjustments can and will be made in funding levels for each of the departments. That's the thing. There's a lot of, you try to do things that are good for the long term of the town. In some cases, you have to make decisions that are just, we're going to have to make do with what we have till next year. If that's an area where it can be done without causing any major harm. It's very complex because each issue has its own characteristics that it brings with it. There's some things you can't wait. And then there's some things that can wait. And then there's some things that really should not wait. It would be fiscally irresponsible to wait on some things. And you don't want to make any budget, kind of cliffs or shortfalls for the next year.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You can kind of do stuff this year. I've seen that tactic done before, but it kind of creates a nightmare for the next budget year. So try to avoid doing that. Try to make sure you're budgeting to make your budget fit what can happen this year, as well as smoothing the path for path forward into next year.
Well, Jon, I hope you are able to get some sleep over the next few months instead of the stress and all these extra meetings that you have added to your schedule that you are volunteering for and everything. I really appreciate you coming on for the first episode of Coventry Confidential and giving us just telling us a little bit about you and the whole budget wrangling that we're in the middle of right now. But we'll have to have you come back. I mean, if it's going to be 6 weeks out, and I'm going to try to do these on a weekly basis, we'll have to come out and you'll have to update us maybe before the town meeting about where things are and how you feel about them. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for coming on.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on the inaugural cast here of Coventry Confidential. I hope that this show gets some play, some airplay, and that it doesn't remain confidential.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll see you later. See you around.
We'll see you.